Mr. Lane is starting us off.
Good afternoon, council members. John Lane, Senior Counsel with the Executive's Office. It's my great pleasure to be here today representing the Public Safety Work Group and to provide an overview of the Justice Fund, which as stated is a 1/10 of 1% sales tax, or put in another way, 1 penny on a $10 purchase. The elected leaders in the public safety for Pierce County have determined that moving forward with the Justice Fund is necessary so that we can make sure that we maintain and continue to enhance the public safety investments that this community needs. They do not take this lightly. That is why we have ensured in this ordinance that there are significant transparency, accountability, and reporting measurements so that we make sure that there are metrics-based results that the public will see from the investments of this fund. If we could go to the next slide. So I and Ms. Muth, Director of the Finance Department, will be going over an overview today, and then other members of the Public Safety Work Group who participated over the fall, as mentioned previously by Ms. Kelly, will come up and tell you a little bit about why they support this and how this impacts and benefits their daily work now and into the future. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, leaders from the Sheriff's Office, the Prosecuting Attorney, the Superior Courts, the Executive, Public Defenders, the Superior Court Clerk's Office, Finance, all came together to have a robust discussion throughout the fall about the opportunity available through Engrossed House Bill 2015 at the direction of the Council. There was lots of back and forth, lots of understanding, and together they agreed that this is where we should move forward and that this is in the best interest of the public safety to create a sustainable, ongoing revenue source to support the public safety needs. Go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, this was not something that was taken lightly, and transparency and accountability measures were critical and are woven throughout this proposal. You can see that there is a Justice Fund Advisory Board, which is made up of the same individuals who came, and departments and offices who came together to put this together, so that they will continue to be invested as we move forward over the years. What I think was really important about this group was all of these different elected offices and departments coming together and weaving together a unified safety plan for Pierce County. And it's that unified safety plan that will continue to be worked as we move forward into the future. But we want to make sure that there are actual performance metrics that are determined in coordination with the Performance Audit Committee, which also, as you know, involves citizen representatives. So this group, in conjunction with the Performance Audit Committee, will come forward with the metrics that must be approved by the Council, and that is how we will continue to measure that these investments over the years are going to public safety and are delivering actual results. That is the critical point. If we're going to implement this 1 penny on $10 purchase, we still want to make sure that all of these investments are having the results that were intended when enacted. This is also a special revenue fund. That means that when we take from the budget, we draw down against this revenue fund. That again adds more transparency, so you can see anytime we put into the budget from this fund, you're going to have to draw down, and you will see exactly where the funds from the Justice Fund are going in the Pierce County budget. Also, there is an annual report that was required by the state legislature, but it's also required by the ordinance to go to the executive and to the council. And we ensure that any supplanting, making sure that if any funds used from this are going to pay for what are current expenses, that we make sure that they are dedicated and continue to be paid on criminal justice and public safety purposes. That is what we're doing here. That is what we're going to continue to do. That is what the public safety leaders who came to support this proposal all agreed upon. So Quick overview, next slide, please, of House Bill 2015, which Ms. Kelly already briefed on, but there is a grant program, and we will look forward in exploring that as the Sheriff's Office here, and that will be coming before you soon. And as we said again, the 1 penny on $10 purchase, 1/10 of 1% tax. In order to implement this tax, the county does need to meet the grant requirements, which we believe we do, and the Sheriff's Office has worked extremely hard in cooperation with other departments themselves over the last several months to make sure that that is submitted. If there are any discrepancies, as mentioned, there will be 6 months in which we can continue to work those out with the Criminal Justice Training Commission. We have reached out and are in touch with King County and Kent, who has been approved, so we can have lessons learned from there. We have had, and Under Sheriff Fajardo has had strong conversations with the Criminal Justice Training Commission, and they really want to make sure that we do meet these requirements. And so while there's a penalty that's a possibility, we feel confident that we're going to be approved and that penalty is not going to be something that is going to happen. As mentioned again, any use of these funds have to be directed towards criminal justice purposes, which Ms. Kelly outlined in her presentation. So if we could go to the next slide. How we arrived here today, just a brief overview, which was alluded to. The legislature passed in gross substitute House Bill 2015 last session, providing this option. The executive sent a letter to the council in October notifying that we intended to explore this. The first meeting of the public safety work group was held in October. And at that first meeting, goals, assumptions, and principles were developed and agreed upon, and I'll get to those in the next slide. But in November, we made presentations about the funding requests that each office or department felt that they needed, and those were explored. The council, as mentioned in November, passed the directive to the executive, propose this tax with a spending plan. In December, we presented at the Public Safety Funding Group and determined their final spending plan. And we made a presentation to all of you before the Public Safety Committee in December, so to give you a full background on kind of where we're at. And then ultimately, we transmitted this ordinance with the supporting letter signed on by all of the members of the work group. So next slide, please. So as mentioned, again, this was the goal that the public safety work group came up with to ensure stable, sustainable funding for public safety and help our law enforcement justice offices, departments adjust to adapt and changing needs. This was determined, as I said, at the first meeting. It was reaffirmed at every meeting afterwards. We asked if there were any changes from anybody, and people continued to agree. This is the goal, and this is what we need to be doing as Pierce County. The assumptions was a significant portion, about 80% of the revenue would be used to maintain current services and staffing and ensure flexibility in the future to not lock in all new spending and ongoing costs and address future needs or opportunities. So again, this group understood that we have, and Ms. DeMuth will go into more detail, ongoing and escalating costs, and we're going to need this fund now and into the future to continue to provide the level of service that the residents of Pierce County are entitled to. The principles were to fulfill essential obligations and statutory requirements, not go backwards on existing capacity for justice partners, make progress on department strategic priorities, and be responsive to community needs. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. DeMuth to look at more of the direct financial purposes and potential expenditures of this.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. I'm Julie DeMuth. I'm the Director of Finance for the county. This afternoon, I'm going to outline the fiscal pressures driving the need for a justice fund and how proposed revenues will be targeted to protect public safety services and strengthen our justice system capacity. Public safety and the criminal justice system represent 76% of our general fund spending. That's about $730 million in the current 2026-27 biennium. The general fund receives the county's unrestricted revenues. This is largely in the form of property and sales taxes, and is responsible for funding public safety and the county's criminal justice system. The general fund also supports a range of other legally required and essential public services, such as elections, licensing, property tax assessments, collection, code enforcement, our park system, recreation services, and medical examiner services. It also funds core operations like IT, finance, human resources, and our facilities. Deep cuts in these operational areas would directly undermine the county's ability to run basic government functions and legally required public services. As a result, there's very limited flexibility in the general fund to absorb rising costs. We are projecting a $34 million ongoing structural deficit by 2028, an amount that cannot be addressed through incremental reductions alone. To put that into perspective, a $34 million gap is larger than the entire general fund budgets of 13 of our county departments. An across-the-board cut could result in a $5.5 million reduction to law enforcement, resulting in the loss of as many as 37 law enforcement deputies. Even eliminating all of our parks and recreation services would still not be enough to close the gap. Addressing the deficit through cuts alone would require eliminating multiple departments and making deep reductions across many areas, including public safety. Because public safety and the courts dominate our general fund spending, large reductions inevitably fall back on law enforcement, corrections, and our courts. And without new revenue, maintaining our current service levels we have today becomes increasingly unrealistic. Next slide, please. Building on the structural deficit and limited flexibility that I just described, this slide shows how the general fund is already heavily concentrated in criminal justice. The 7 largest general fund appropriations are all justice-related, totaling $695 million of our $967 million general fund budget. Sheriff's law enforcement and corrections alone exceed $400 million, and this is before accounting for courts, prosecution, public defense, and juvenile rehabilitation services. The remainder of the general fund supports core operations and other statutorily required county services. In practical terms, there is no large, flexible other category available to absorb justice cost growth. Major areas often assumed to be discretionary, such as housing, homelessness, and behavioral health, are primarily supported by other dedicated revenue sources and not the general fund. When justice system costs increase, counties have very limited revenue tools available, which leaves us with 2 realistic options: deep reductions within our criminal justice system and significant cuts to already lean, legally required general government functions. Without a new dedicated revenue source, the general fund does not have the capacity to accommodate continued justice cost growth without substantial impact to service levels. Next slide, please. So having shown how concentrated our general fund already is in justice functions and how little flexibility exists, this slide focuses on the growth trend behind that pressure. Since the 2018 to 2019 biennium, general fund criminal justice spending has increased 48%, rising from $504 million to $747 million in the current biennium. In the 2026-27 biennium alone, our public safety costs are projected to increase by $38 million compared to the last biennium. Legal and judicial services are projected to increase by another $19 million. This growth is largely driven by factors outside of our local discretion: state mandates, labor and benefit costs, rising incarceration expenses, caseload growth, and evolving legal standards. Even with vacancy savings and other ongoing cost containment strategies, baseline justice system costs continue to grow faster than our general fund revenues. Next slide, please. Taken together, the concentration and growth in our justice system costs translate into increasing financial risk for the county. Our risk model here shows that the county can manage our near-term pressures, but largely through one-time measures rather than ongoing sustainable solutions. The 2026-27 budget meets our fund balance targets, but it does so by deferring risk into the out years, where reserves are projected to fall below minimum cash flow thresholds. A minimum fund balance of 15% is needed to preserve the county's ability to respond to emergencies, economic downturns, or unexpected costs. Dropping below 10% creates immediate cash flow risk, meaning the county will be unable to meet payroll and other essential obligations. Without additional revenue, the primary way to restore balance is through service reductions. And because criminal justice represents the largest share of our general fund spending, those reductions will disproportionately fall on law enforcement, our courts, and our corrections. Next slide, please. So the financial risk I just described is driven by an ongoing structural imbalance that we have, the gap between our recurring general fund revenues and the cost of maintaining current services. Even under conservative assumptions, that annual shortfall grows to $34 million by 2028 and $46 million by 2031. It's important to note that these projections reflect only the cost of sustaining our current service levels. They don't account for program expansions or service enhancements needed to keep pace with population growth in our county or address emerging community needs. Absent new ongoing revenue, closing a deficit of this magnitude would require large recurring service reductions across our entire organization. The Justice Fund does not eliminate our entire structural deficit, but it meaningfully reduces pressure on the general fund and helps avoid cuts to our core justice and public safety services. Next slide. This slide highlights the county's largest and most immediate criminal justice cost drivers. These are pressures that are mandatory, they're structural in nature, and they are largely outside of local control. First, we have a state-mandated public defense caseload standards. Compliance requires a substantial increase in staffing, driving an estimated $32 million in added ongoing costs and nearly 50 new positions through 2031. Over the next 6 years, the county must add these positions to remain in compliance with state law. Second, the county faces significant exposure from tort claims, particularly related to our detention facilities. This represents hundreds of millions of dollars in potential liability and substantial financial risk. Third, our constitutionally required jail medical services continue to escalate as acuity increases, our jail populations age, and regulatory and legal standards tighten. Since 2020, these costs have grown by roughly $6 million per year and must be provided regardless of whether we have funding available. Fourth, our labor arbitration outcomes for law enforcement and corrections represent another unavoidable pressure. While specific impacts are still pending, historical experience shows these decisions routinely result in material ongoing cost increases. From 2020 through 2024, labor costs grew more than 25% for law enforcement and more than 24% for corrections, an increase of over $22 million in salary and benefit costs. Finally, the county must confront aging detention and juvenile rehabilitation facilities that require major upgrades or complete replacement to meet the safety, security, and compliance standards needed. These are not enhancements or expansions. Our adult, medium, and maximum security jail is beyond its useful life, and these are baseline reinvestments needed to simply keep the facility operational. These justice-related pressures exist alongside many other significant county cost drivers, such as our infrastructure, maintenance of our roads, bridge replacements. These further constrain our overall fiscal capacity. Taken together, these factors demonstrate that the county's cost growth is structural, cumulative, and it's largely unavoidable. Next slide. So given the cost pressures that I just outlined, this slide summarizes the consequences if the county does not move forward with the Justice Fund. By 2028, the general fund is projected to face a $34 million ongoing structural deficit. This is before accounting for any future program expansion or service enhancements. Closing a gap of this magnitude without new revenue will require deep, recurring, across-the-board reductions in both public safety and justice services, as well as our other core public services. Because criminal justice functions comprise the largest share of general fund spending, they would inevitably absorb a disproportionate share of the cuts. The impact would be system-wide, simultaneously affecting our law enforcement, our corrections, courts, prosecution, and public defense, rather than being isolated to any single department or function. Next slide. This slide explains how the Justice Fund is structured to ensure continuous investment in public safety and the criminal justice system. The Justice Fund is legally restricted. This is both by state law as well as the proposed ordinance before you today. It's restricted to law and justice purposes only. Beginning in 2028, at least 80% of all Justice Fund spending must be used to sustain public safety and justice services. This reinforces that the fund is it's intended to stabilize our core service delivery. Second, Justice Fund revenues may be used to pay debt service, including principal, interest, and financing costs for our adult detention and juvenile rehabilitation facilities. These are major, unavoidable capital obligations that we face. Debt service is paid first, and it's excluded from that 80% requirement. Third, a limited portion of the fund may support targeted evidence-based programs for individuals with current or prior justice system involvement. These programs must be designed to reduce recidivism and prevent entry into the criminal justice system. The legislation expressly prohibits using Justice Fund revenues for general population or unrelated programs. Fourth, strong accountability and transparency are built in. All recipients of funding must execute a data sharing agreement with the Department of Finance that specifies required data, reporting methods, and reporting frequency. Non-compliance results in suspension of eligibility for Justice Fund dollars. These requirements ensure the Justice Fund is narrowly scoped, primarily focused on sustaining our existing services, restricted to targeted justice purposes, and subject to ongoing performance reporting and accountability. Next slide. This slide shows the revenue impact of the Justice Fund. If adopted, the Justice Fund is projected to generate more than $27 million annually by 2027, providing roughly a 4% increase in funding for public safety and justice services. With Justice Fund revenues primarily dedicated to sustaining current operations, that projected gap is reduced to approximately $10 to $12 million. So in other words, the Justice Fund does not eliminate the entire structural problem that we face, but it removes the majority of the near-term gap and meaningfully slows the erosion of our public services. The Justice Fund provides a material ongoing revenue source that stabilizes public safety and justice spending. Next slide. This slide provides a high-level overview of how revenues would be invested in the 2026-27 biennium. Consistent with the guardrails that I previously described, the county proposes to use initial Justice Fund revenues for targeted strategic investments that stabilize public safety staffing, modernize equipment and technology, address critical facility and operational needs, and strengthens our court services. The largest share supports the Sheriff's Office, reflecting the scale and operational demands of law enforcement and corrections. A significant portion is also dedicated to information technology, reflecting that modern justice operations rely on shared, secure, and efficient systems. Investments in juvenile court, superior court, assigned counsel, and the prosecuting attorney focus on court capacity, timely case processing, and effective case outcomes. These investments are targeted and they are evidence-based. They are strategic actions to protect existing capacity and address known system gaps that we have. Collectively, the proposed investments total $36 million over the biennium. So the next set of slides that I'll walk through show these investment areas in more detail, including our ongoing versus one-time costs and the specific outcomes that they're intended to support. Next slide. Proposed Justice Fund investments for the Sheriff's Office total $25.4 million, reflecting the largest share of the proposed spending. These investments target both ongoing operational needs as well as one-time capital and equipment improvements. On the ongoing side, nearly $1.6 million continues hiring and retention incentives to support recruitment and retention of law enforcement and corrections deputies. This includes $1.1 million to provide retention payments for eligible corrections deputies employed as of July 1 of this year, and an additional $480,000 will sustain hiring incentives into the future. These investments help address critical staffing shortages in the Sheriff's Office and help us retain our experienced deputies. Approximately $1.1 million supports the expansion of body-worn cameras for corrections deputies. This investment improves safety, accountability, and transparency within our jail. $614,000 establishes a dedicated evidence technology management unit within the Sheriff's Office. This includes 3 positions to support law enforcement technology systems, including all of our Axon functionality, as well as compliance and technical support for our deputies on the street. Turning to one-time investments, just over $21 million is proposed for critical capital improvements to our county jail, which has reached the end of its useful life. A study conducted in 2022 estimates that approximately $38 million is needed to renovate the minimum security jail, and $390 million is needed to rebuild a facility to house our medium and maximum security offenders. While these figures have been adjusted for inflation, actual costs today are likely higher. $250,000 invests in life-saving protective breathing equipment and required certifications. This is to enhance our responders' safety during hazardous incidents such as fires or chemical releases. Finally, $500,000 replaces a specialized SWAT vehicle that's used in high-risk incidents. This ensures reliable tactical response capability and helps protect both officers and the public. Overall, $3.3 million of the Sheriff's Office proposal is ongoing funding, and $22.1 million is a one-time investment. Next slide. The Justice Fund includes targeted investments to strengthen the shared technology backbone that supports law enforcement, courts, prosecutors, defense, and corrections countywide. Modern justice operations depend on secure, reliable, as well as integrated systems. Without them, our cases slow down, staff efficiencies are lost, and our costs rise. These are one-time investments that build on LINKS as the county's core criminal justice system and improve how justice partners share information and operate across a connected platform. Approximately $2.1 million funds the build of a single countywide digital evidence management platform to securely store, manage, and share video, audio, and digital files. This system will be built within LINKS, and it'll replace the current solution that requires manual workarounds and significant staff capacity to manage. This system will improve efficiency and access for our prosecutors, public defenders, and the courts. $3.1 million addresses a backlog of LINKS enhancement requests from criminal justice agencies. These enhancements improve case processing speed, data quality, and system reliability in the county's primary case management system. Just over $1 million builds new case management functionality in LINKS to support the prosecuting attorney's civil caseload. This will improve workflow efficiency as well as data sharing. $168,000 replaces the end-of-life state system that is currently used by our district courts. They have no choice but to find a new platform. Functionality will be built in LINKS, enhancing information sharing across the justice system, and it'll reduce operational risk tied to an unsupported legacy system. Finally, a $3,000 investment implements automated transcription with end links for audio and video evidence that are used in court proceedings. Collectively, these largely one-time investments will reduce manual work, improve collaboration and information sharing, and support faster, more accurate case processing across our justice system. Next slide. So given the significant investment being proposed in technology, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of two of our key systems. These are shared enterprise platforms that form the backbone of the county's justice system and support coordinated, efficient, and legally compliant operations across our agencies. First, LINKS is the county's primary case management system and central system of record for law enforcement, courts, prosecutors, corrections, and defense. It supports more than 8,000 public account users and thousands of active cases each year. LINKS enables end-to-end case processing from charging and court workflows to document management, jail management, and jury administration so that cases move through our system accurately and efficiently. Second, the digital evidence management system establishes a single county-wide platform for storing, managing, and sharing video, audio, and other digital evidence used in legal cases. It supports the growing use of body-worn cameras, in-car video, and other digital evidence across public safety. This system will enable secure evidence sharing among law enforcement, prosecutors, defense counsel, and courts, and it'll strengthen chain of custody controls, transparency, and legal compliance, while also delivering significant staff efficiency gains. The investment replaces an inadequate solution that we currently have with a unified platform. These are one-time strategic investments that strengthen shared infrastructure used county-wide. They will improve efficiency, accuracy, and accountability, and help ensure the justice system operates as an integrated enterprise rather than a collection of disconnected tools. Next slide. This slide highlights nearly $1.7 million in ongoing Justice Fund investments for juvenile court, focused on prevention, accountability, transparency, and youth outcomes. The largest investment, $1.48 million, maintains our positive youth development programs, which are centered on prevention, skill building, and early intervention. These programs are designed to reduce youth involvement in the justice system, improve long-term outcomes, and avoid higher cost system involvement later in life. The funding also replaces time-limited grants and ARPA resources that expire at the end of this year, and it'll provide stable, ongoing support for these programs. $43,000 expands the use of body-worn cameras for juvenile detention officers, strengthening accountability, transparency, and safety for both our youth and staff within Raymond Hall. $144,000 adds a dedicated public records officer to ensure timely, accurate, and compliant responses to public records requests. These investments focus on keeping youth out of deeper system involvement while strengthening accountability and compliance within our juvenile court operations. All $1.6 million represents ongoing funding to sustain proven, evidence-based approaches. Next slide, please. This slide highlights investments that support overall justice system performance and unified public safety outcomes. On the ongoing side, $990,000 establishes a new Superior Court Judicial Department to manage growing caseloads, expand therapeutic court options, and improve case processing efficiency. This includes 3 positions for Superior Court and 2 positions for the clerk for the Superior Court. Also ongoing, $118,000 invests in AI-assisted legal research tools that enable prosecutors to analyze case law more quickly, draft documents more efficiently, and share information more consistently across partners. Turning to our one-time investments, $168,000 adds an investigator process server position for assigned counsel. This is to support timely case preparation, service of legal documents, and court proceedings. These functions are currently performed through contracted professional services. Adding this position allows assigned counsel to gradually reduce reliance on the contract, making the investment cost neutral within 2 years. Finally, $900,000 supports reentry programs that help people successfully transition from incarceration back into our community, reducing recidivism as well as long-term system costs. As directed by the council in the budget, Performance Audit will conduct a comprehensive review of reentry programs, assessing outcomes, cost effectiveness, coordination, and alignment with evidence-based practices. Initial findings and a system gap analysis is to be reported by October 15th of this year. So these funds will support implementation of recommendations from that review. Together, these investments address targeted gaps that affect multiple parts of the justice system and will help improve coordination, efficiency, and outcomes. In total, this category includes $1.1 million in ongoing funding and just over $1 million in one-time investments. Next slide. I want to close by grounding us in a few key takeaways from the presentation. The Justice Fund creates a dedicated ongoing revenue source for law enforcement, courts, and justice partners at a time when our costs are rising rapidly, mandates are increasing, and our revenue growth is slowing. The primary purpose is stabilization, maintaining current public safety and justice services, and avoiding catastrophic cuts, while still allowing for targeted evidence-based improvements where they matter most. It also strengthens coordination and accountability across the justice system through shared investments in staffing, technology, and infrastructure. Why this matters? The Justice Fund reduces our reliance on temporary, one-time funding strategies, as well as the use of our reserves to keep essential services running. It helps protect long-term system capacity and avoids the service erosion and instability that come with repeated reactive cuts. And it is carefully structured and accountable, with clear guardrails to ensure new revenue is used responsibly and for its intended purpose. In terms of next steps, council action is needed by March 3rd in order to allow implementation by July 1st. Next slide. I also want to take just a moment on accountability and oversight, as this is a core feature of the Justice Fund. The legislation establishes a Justice and Unified Safety Tax Performance Advisory Board to guide and review how Justice Fund revenues are spent. The board includes leadership from law enforcement, courts, prosecution, defense, finance, and corrections, ensuring system-wide representation and perspective. The proposal requires a unified set of performance metrics, subject to county council approval, to measure effectiveness and outcomes. Those metrics will be supported by a publicly available dashboard or reporting tool so the community can see how funds are being used and what results are being achieved. Justice Fund expenditures are reviewed as part of the executive's budget process. The executive must provide written recommendations to the council before budget adoption, focused on alignment with approved metrics and demonstrated outcomes. Ongoing oversight is also built in. The advisory board must meet at least twice per year, and it'll operate under formal procedural rules. Independent performance audits are conducted every 6 years to evaluate efficiency and effectiveness. And annual reporting is provided to the Washington State Association of Counties and will be available to the public. These requirements ensure Justice Fund revenues are used transparently, that they are tied to measurable outcomes, and subject to ongoing council oversight. Next slide, please. So I want to thank you, council members, for listening to our presentation today and considering this important proposal. I also want to take a moment to sincerely thank the Justice Fund work group members for the time, collaboration, and thoughtful engagement that went into developing this proposal. This has been a true collaborative effort, bringing together law enforcement, corrections, courts, prosecution, defense, finance, and policy partners to work through complex issues and build a balanced, accountable approach. The proposal before you reflects many hours of discussion, refinement, and shared problem solving, and I'm grateful for the professionalism and commitment everyone brought to the table. At this point, I'd like, if it's okay, to invite a few of the work group members to come forward and share some brief remarks with you. And then after that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.